Welcome to another episode of Wide Angle. Today we are in conversation with Oliver Page. I'm going to introduce all of you to Oliver quickly before I hand it over to Oliver. Oliver is a vastly experienced learning and development professional, as well as an ICF certified coach. Oliver has been in the Middle East for close to 7 years now, and hence he's very familiar with the Gulf market. He's worked with a lot of clients here, a lot of companies here. Oliver is from the UK and he lives in Dubai with his family. And in his current assignment, he works with an organization called Ignite Training as a training specialist and a coach. To tell you a little more about what Oliver loves to do, Oliver is passionate about people development and he uses his fantastic coaching skills to help people achieve success and become the best version of themselves. I, for one, have personally experienced his coaching sessions. I have been coached by him, and it's an absolute pleasure to reveal that he's a brilliant coach. He's very skilled, he knows exactly what he does, and he managed to create a lot of aha moments for me. In today's chat, Oliver is going to be discussing coaching, its merits, and how business leaders and organizations can benefit from this concept. So that's what we're going to focus on today. So on that note, Oliver, let me extend a very warm welcome to you. Thank you so much for joining us, and we really appreciate your time today.
No, it's absolutely great. I'm really looking forward to spreading the message.
Wonderful, great. So should we quickly jump into action then?
Absolutely.
All right. So Oliver, I know a lot of people hear coaching, the word coaching being mentioned very loosely these days, but I'm sure many don't know what coaching really is. So why don't we start off by you telling us what really is coaching?
Yeah, so coaching itself is very different to what people actually think of it, or the way that people say coaching in quite a flippant manner. But essentially what coaching is, or it's defined by the ICF, which is the International Coaching Federation, as partnering with clients in a thought-provoking and creative process that inspires them to maximize their personal and professional potential. So that sounds like quite a long definition, but if you really strip it back, the key word in there is thought-provoking process and inspire. So essentially, one of the things that often gets confused with coaching is mentoring. Now, someone's like, if someone goes into, they say, I'm being coached by my manager. What's actually happening there is mentoring, because they're essentially being told what to do from someone that has more experience than them. So mentoring is, by definition, is a system of semi-structured guidance by where one person will share their knowledge and experience to assist others. So if you look at those two definitions separately, you've got coaching, which is about a thought-provoking process, whereas mentoring is much more around sharing skills and knowledge. So essentially what coaching is a process. So what would happen is it's around understanding, as an individual, as a coachee, what are your goals, whether they're personal, whether they're professional. And then the coach will then work with you and ask you a lot of quite searching questions that will allow you to be able to understand them more, understand yourself more, increase your self-awareness, and set yourself smaller milestones and sort of action points and action plans in order for you to then be able to move towards or achieve those goals in the short and longer term. So it's very important to understand that as a coach, I'm not going to come in and I'm not going to tell you what to do. You know that. There's been when we've had our coaching sessions, I define this really clearly to start with, because a lot of the time when I go into when I begin a coaching relationship, they go, I want you to tell me about how I manage my team. And I go, look, I'm not going to do that. That's not my job. Yeah. My job is to manage the process. The problem is if you were to go in, if I was to go in as a coach and I was to tell you what to do, I don't know as much about the situation. I don't understand the politics. I don't understand what the skill levels are within your team, all of these things. So I can't actually give solid advice. Plus, as if I was to do that, if I was to give advice and say, I think you should do this, if the coachee was then to go and do that, and then it went wrong, who are they going to blame?
Yeah.
So that's the key definition. So really with coaching, it's about what are you trying to achieve, whether that's around personal or professional. It could be something to do with your health. It could be something to do with getting a promotion. It could be to do with engaging your team. There could be a number of different things. And then it's about understanding what the reality is, what's your current situation, how can you move forward, and then what will you do?
Very interesting. So I'm going to borrow a little from the experience that I had with you. I remember you never gave me a solution to any of the points that I brought up, but what you actually did was you asked me a whole bunch of questions and you made me introspect and think. I think in a way what you did was you also developed the capability within me to kind of, ask myself those questions and maybe develop problem-solving capability. So
Absolutely.
If one gets hold of a great coach and if one is able to experience a great coaching journey, would you say that this would also empower one with problem-solving skills?
Absolutely. I think one of the key things that I do when I'm coaching, especially if I've got more time with a coachee, is actually to sort of, a bit like the Wizard of Oz, you sort of lift the curtain. So I share with my coachees, these are why I'm asking these questions. This is the model I'm using. I'm doing this so that you're aware of this, or to make you think of this in a certain way, so that then you can understand more about it. So for me, after a successful coaching engagement, whether that be 5, 6, 7, 10, 20 sessions, I essentially want them to be able to go away and coach themselves. So that they can notice those little habits that they're doing, or the thought, maybe they've got a negative thought that's holding them back, or maybe they go, hang on, why am I doing this? And am I self-sabotaging, which is quite a common thing. So absolutely, that's the aim. I often come in, especially when it's face-to-face particularly, I go in with a booklet and I say, look, here's a booklet. This tells you everything and every single model that I use. And I do explain them. I simplify them, because if, as a coach, I think the training, I think it was 60 hours or 70 hours of actual face-to-face coach intensive training. So there's a lot more to it. But in terms of the models themselves, when they're really stripped back and simplified, that you can apply them to yourself, and also as a manager, you can apply them to your team.
So it does create a high level of self-awareness in individuals.
Absolutely.
So typically, Oliver, how long does a coaching process last? Is there a specified time, or is it a case-to-case basis?
I think it really depends on what your goals and objectives are. If I would recommend having a coach all the time, because at no point as a human being do we ever reach our potential. We get to a certain point and then we think we've reached the top, and then as humans it's never good enough, and there's always room for improvement. So it very much depends on your goals and objectives. What I tend to say is after 4 hours, sort of 4 sessions, is where you start to see a real difference in whether that's your mindset or what you're achieving, and that's where the magic starts to happen. So I would say definitely do a minimum of 3 or 4 hours worth, so you can actually see the impact of what that is on you and also other people around you.
Wonderful. So are there any particular models that you use when you get into a coaching conversation? Any particular tool that you would like to talk about?
Absolutely. Well, I think the main or the most commonly used tool is John Whitmore's Grow model. So John Whitmore is the founding father of coaching. He's got a great book, if you've ever got the time, called Coaching for Performance, and that's sort of it's the holy book. It's like the Bible or the Quran of of coaching. And I remember during my coaching training, it was, you must read these chapters before we have our next meeting, because this is what we're going to discuss, and that's what everything's really based around. The model I use is this model, but also it's got a little bit of extra things tagged on. So I'll give you the model, and then I'll throw in the extra couple of bits. So yeah, very simple. So it's GROW, the acronym. So goal. What is the goal that you want to achieve? What's the reality? Is the R.
Yeah.
Options. So what options do you have available that could help you move towards achieving that goal?
Okay.
And then W, there's a few different varieties, but it's will, what, or way forward. So of those options, which are you going to take forward?
Mm-hmm.
So you can almost do that to yourself. You can go, this year I would like to run a marathon.
Right.
Okay, what's the reality? No, I'm a bit overweight. I've only ever run a 5K, and that was 3 years ago. Okay, this is the reality of my situation. Okay, what are my options? I can do this type of training. I can get a personal trainer. I can, there's lots of you can use an app. Okay, what will I do? The W, I will, and you can take some time to consider your different options, and then you can go, do you know what? I'm going to get myself a personal trainer, and that is going to be my aim for the year. And then that's what you can purely focus on. So it's very simple, but underneath that, there's a lot more that goes on, which I'm sure you know as well, because I've shared some of that with you before. The extra bit that I add on to the end is what's going to get in your way. So if I take that example before about running a marathon, you go, yeah, okay, I'm going to get a personal trainer, but what's going to stop me from achieving that goal? What if I was to lose my job? If I was to lose my job, I can't afford a personal trainer. Okay, so if that does happen, what's the plan? How do I still achieve that? So if you're going to get demotivated, how am I going to reignite that passion? What does that look like? Yeah. And then another element that I add on to the end as well, and some people find this a little bit strange, is how are you going to reward yourself? And I don't mean going out and buying something. It could be going out and buying something, or it's just a matter of purely acknowledging your achievement. Because we've had this conversation. You go through, you get on the treadmill of life, and you're doing so much and you're achieving so much. But then as soon as you've achieved it, you've gone, yeah, okay, great, on to the next thing. So that's the point when you need to just really recognize and just go, I've done a really good job there, pat myself on the back. I'm a human, and I know I'm going to want to achieve more. So what's that next step? But really recognizing and rewarding yourself, whether that's just through an acknowledgement, whether that's something physical, whether you go out for a meal, whatever that might be. But that's a really important step, because it reinforces that positive behavior.
Yeah, wonderful, very interesting. What in your experience, talk to me about one or two, amazing transformations that you've seen in people who've gone through a coaching journey.
Absolutely. So I think one that really springs to mind is a lady based in, she works for a professional services organisation, and she's based in Saudi. She's a Saudi national. And initially, I'd never actually dealt with a Saudi national, especially a female. And I was interested to know how this dynamic was going to be. And a big part of what I'd heard from her manager, it was actually about education. So when she was briefed about this, and she knew this is an area she needed to work on, so we had lots of conversation around this to try and understand what was getting in her way. In the first session, I was talking to her, and I thought straight away, I thought, you have no issue with your communication. There's nothing wrong with the way you're speaking, the way that you communicate. I've dealt with her even by email, and it was perfect. There was no issue. Obviously, with English being a second language, there's a couple of words here and there, but we're not perfect. I can only speak English. So, so around session 3 or 4, we started to uncover that she actually had, it was around confidence and a belief. It was a belief that her English wasn't good. So as soon as we identified that, and I spent a lot of time building her up and actually holding up a mirror essentially and saying, there's no problem with your communication. And then once she kind of understood that and came up with some different ways in which she would communicate, that really helped her. I think one of the key issues was because of her lack of confidence, she would over communicate. So whether that was in person, she would just keep talking and talking and talking, or in an email, she would just write and try and explain a whole situation to a partner. And in professional services, as a lot of us know, that partners don't have the time to be reading lots of information. They want the facts, right? They want to know this, and we need to do this, or this needs to be raised. Whereas she'd write paragraphs and paragraphs. So once she understood that it was actually herself getting in her way, that allowed her to basically build up the confidence in herself and actually try out not communicating overly. And that made a real difference for her, and she ended up, moving forward with that. And that was the thing that was blocking her from being promoted, because she was good at her job. It was just her communication was getting in her way, and she ended up getting promoted 6 months later.
Wow. So I think what I understand is coaching also gets you to challenge your own belief system. Sometimes you may be on to disempowering beliefs, and gets you to challenge those, and that could be life-changing.
For sure. And I think a personal example for me, I had a coach, and when I was actually going through my coaching training, I worked with another coach who was also going through the program, and we got to know each other very well, and that allowed us to be very, very open with each other, which is really important, is trusting your coach and the confidentiality and all of those elements, because once you start to open up, that's where the magic happens, because you start to reveal things about yourself to yourself, but also to someone else, and acknowledging that's important. But during that process, I never used to facilitate training. I went into coaching initially because it was one-to-one. It was good for me in sort of a personal level. I didn't used to like speaking in front of audiences. Saying that, when I was back at university, I was always told that I was a really good speaker. Never really took that feedback on board and what have you. So I always actually avoided doing any kind of group delivery. And I've got a lot of background in business finance, and at Ignite we run a business simulation called Apples and Oranges. It's a fun game where you run a company basically, and it's all about understanding the P&L and balance sheet and these elements. And the owner of our business, Russell, our director, he said you should be delivering this program because you know more about this than I do, and you can explain things. And if I get a question that I'm not sure about, I don't know how to answer it. I need you to be delivering this program. And I shied away from it for a couple of years. And then when I was going through my coaching, I thought, you know what, I've just got to do this. So I booked onto it, and through speaking to Paul, who was coaching me at the time, I said to him, I brought to the coaching session, I said, I've got to deliver this session next week, and I'm petrified.
Yeah.
I'm absolutely petrified. It's giving me sleepless nights. So through a lot of conversation, and he was asking me questions, and that's why it's great to have a coach even as a coach, because often you don't see things within yourself, or you don't want to look at those things. As humans, we do avoid the negatives about ourselves, and we all have them. And what I ended up getting to is I was holding on to a belief, and the belief was that everything has to be perfect.
Yeah.
And through that was holding me back. That was stopping me from being able to go in and put myself forward and deliver that session. So he asked me a really great question, which was, what's an alternative belief that you could try out? And I thought for a little while, and I thought, it doesn't have to be perfect. It's something as simple as that. It doesn't have to be perfect. And just roll with it. And I remember turning up to the training that morning, and I was very, very nervous. And just before the session started, I took myself to the bathroom, and I looked in the mirror, and I just said, I actually mouthed to myself, it doesn't have to be perfect. And just holding that belief, and it was hard to hold that belief and just try it, but I went in and I did it and I had an amazing time. It wasn't perfect, it was the first time I delivered that program. It wasn't going to be perfect, but it gave me a starting point and it gave me the confidence to then know I can go in and improve that. And since then, now it's water off a duck's back. I no problem, I just go in and do it. Obviously I do think about it, and every time I come away from a session, I still analyze my performance to myself. Because I think what I've understood with that is it's never going to be perfect. I think it's more of the belief, it can always be improved. And that's the whole philosophy of coaching as well. It's just about improvement.
I think that's a great point. I think perfectionism, any which ways, is overrated. And I think it's quite empowering to tell ourselves that things have to be perfect, because like you said, they never will be. I think a great mantra is, it doesn't have to be perfect. Just get started.
Exactly. Get it done and then improve it.
Yeah, great. So, Oliver, businesses around the world are going through a challenging time right now. Would you still recommend that companies invest in coaching? If so, why? And which part of an organization, in terms of hierarchy, where should companies invest their money in when it comes to coaching? Should it be for the senior leadership? Should it be for the mid-level leadership? Should it be for the bottom rung of the ladder? Where should people really be focusing their money on when it comes to coaching?
Well, to be honest, the simple answer is everywhere. Because if everyone is going through that process, they will be able to develop themselves almost by themselves and understand what are they doing, what they're doing now, what do they want to achieve, and how are they going to get there. In reality, I think the biggest impact you will see is middle management, particularly people managers, because once you ingrain a coaching culture within your business, if I was to be coaching a middle manager, through the sort of educational piece that I give in terms of the coaching process, that allows them to also be able to coach down the business, so they can then coach their team and then further down, and it's about bringing that culture in. I think in terms of if people should be investing now, 100%. I think there's many studies out there that show the impact of coaching. So there was a study of a Fortune 500 company, and it basically what it looked at was how their executive coaching was impacting their business results, which is the holy grail of our industry, is trying to track that ROI. And they found that it had positive impacts on a number of different measures. So employee engagement is a key one, so keeping people motivated and moving forward. Customer satisfaction, because obviously people were more engaged, therefore they were better with customers. And essentially the financial performance of the business. And that study found that 788% of an ROI on that coaching. So in terms of coaching itself, there's ROI in two sets. So you've got tangible, being your productivity, your revenue, your retention is another key one with more engaged employees. And then there's the intangible, which is communication, better relationships, better self-awareness, which then improves just business efficiency.
Right. So I, in fact, up until a few years ago, I had this misconception that coaching is meant only for personal success and your, when you're working on your personal goals. But now I understand that coaching is also meant for business success and to achieve business results and to generate maybe better communication, efficiencies, productivity within the organization. Wonderful, that's great. So what are some qualities of a great coach? How would you identify one?
In terms of for yourself, I think the key thing is anyone can in theory go out there and call themselves a coach.
Yeah, and I see all of that.
Yeah, anyone can go out there and call themselves a coach. So the first thing I would look at is their credentials. Have they gone through formal coaching training? Have they got any sort of ICF or any other coaching body association? Yeah. The second thing I would look at is potentially their experience, but in terms of what area you want help with, but actually that doesn't really matter. If you remember at the beginning I said coaching isn't about having subject matter experience or expertise, it's actually about being a master of the process. So I would be looking at potentially their background. A very important element is also the relationship that you have with that person. I think it's often good to have someone from the same cultural background as you or similar experiences, because what that will allow is you to form a really strong relationship very early on. And having that strong relationship is important because you trust them. As soon as you've got trust, that's when you can open up and you start to really, basically the more you open up, the better questions a coach can ask you that will help you understand yourself better in your situation. So that's what I would look at. And the final thing would be to take advantage of free sessions. So the majority of coaches will offer a 1 hour taster. And what that's really about is being able to see if there's a good relationship. Because as a coach, it's my duty as well during those sessions at the end of it to go, I don't think this is going to work. So I'm going to have to step away from this, and vice versa. It's an even relationship. It's not the coach is more powerful than the coachee or vice versa. It's about having a partnership. So I think definitely I would try out a couple of different coaches with doing their little taster sessions just to see if you think that's the person for me.
So when somebody is required to go through a coaching program, do you look for whether the coachee is ready for the process? Do you need to have the coachee's buy-in, or how does that work?
Absolutely. Without the coachee's buy-in, it's not going to work because all of the work itself is done by the coachee. If they're not open to wanting to develop, or if they think they're God's gift and they're the best they can be, there's going to be no benefit. I think it's important for the coachee to want to develop, and also to have a clear understanding going in of what that relationship looks like. And that's something that's important to set out right at the very beginning of the relationship.
Absolutely. It's like any personal development commitment, I suppose. Yeah. Unless you commit to developing your own self, nobody can help you. You may go to the most expensive training program, but if you're not willing to change, the skill is really secondary. The will is what matters.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I have a question I'm very curious about. What advice would you give to an aspiring coach, somebody who really wants to develop themselves as a coach and has absolutely no clue about the industry or how things work? Where should they be starting?
I think the first thing straight off the block is experience coaching. If you've not experienced coaching before, go and experience it. It's about it's quite revolutionary. The first time I had a coaching session, I was actually it blew me away a little bit. I walked away with all sorts of emotions, and I was drained, and I was like, oh my goodness. But I walked away understanding so much more about myself. And I think once you experience that, what you can then do is then go and look at the different options available if that's something you want to aspire to be. Because to actually coach someone and have someone have those aha moments, actually sometimes I get a bit of a shiver, and that's my body telling me I've asked the right question, I've done the right thing for that person. So I think if you really believe that that's what you want to do, the first thing is to try and find and research an ICF certified training program. Yeah. ICF is the International Coaching Federation. It is the body for coaching. So once you find one of these programs, there's lots of private companies that deliver them here. ICF don't deliver themselves, but I trained with a company called North Point Coaching Academy, who are very good. I'd recommend them. And you get onto a training program that I think the one that I was on lasted over about 4 months. So it was 3 days in the classroom, virtual classroom sessions. We were meeting with our coaching partners twice a week. So it was very intensive. So I think one thing to understand is it's a commitment. And you're not just going to go and run a 2-day course and be able to go out and deliver coaching. So I think from there it's about going through that program and actually experiencing that yourself. And not everyone's cut out to be a coach. You can tell that. It's a very scary process. You think, oh, it can't be that difficult. You just go in and you ask someone a few questions. Very, very different. The amount of brain work, I walk out of sessions and my head is spun because whilst you're sat there and you know you're listening and trying to understand them and offer them feedback, but at the same time it's about what's the right question to ask, how do I take them down a certain way, and also you've got other elements like the element of time that you've got to consider and making sure that the coachee gets what they want out of it. So I think definitely get onto an ICF coaching program to come full circle and go through that. Once you come out the other side, as scary as it is, you've just got to go out there and you've just got to do sessions, and it's definitely worth doing 3 sessions to start out because it's just about getting your experience. And you can say to the person, you know, especially if they're a colleague or they're someone you know, or someone you know, I wouldn't recommend coaching someone you know, because it's the politics kind of thing that, you know, you could have your own agenda and these things. So if there's a friend of a friend, coach them, do it for free, you know, ask them to buy you a coffee, and just do it, because it's as difficult as it is, the more you do it, the better you will get at it.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, what I understand from what you say is, it is not just a commitment from the coachee's side. I think the coach is just as committed into the process when they're taking someone through a coaching process. The commitment has to be equally strong from both sides.
Absolutely, because if the coach isn't really committed to that individual, then it's not going to work. They're not going to. Yeah. You're not going to ask the right questions. You're not going to listen as intently. You're not going to be able to hold that mirror up, because one of the key things with coaching is to actually be able to give feedback. And the nice thing is if you've got that trust in that relationship, it's very easy to go, can I just offer you some feedback on how you're coming across, or there's a certain body language that you're picking up. Whereas in real life, you know, if I was to walk up to a colleague especially and say, can I give you some feedback, they might be a bit, well, you know, quite defensive. Whereas that's the beauty of having a coach is it's the coach has no agenda. The coach is there to help you and is your, you know, your cheerleader. So it's great to be able to have that open, honest feedback and be able to reflect on that.
Oh yes, and I remember from my coaching experience with you, when we'd identify an action plan or something, a lot of times I wouldn't, you know, be proactive about writing into you, and I know you would check back with me saying, hey, where's that action plan? Where is your commitment? Write back to me now. So I think both parties require a high level of commitment to be able to derive benefit out of the process.
Yeah, and I think on that note, in terms of the role of being a coach, or one of the key benefits of having a coach is just having that accountability of, you know, I've had a great session and now I understand what I need to do to get from A to B, but I could walk away and get busy with life and not actually do anything towards it. So even though there's no consequence to you not doing it, because from a coach's side, it's not my problem if you're not taking steps forward, but just to be able to drop a quick one-line email, what's going on with that action plan? You know, it doesn't need to be a telling off. I'm just giving you a nudge because it's important that you take those steps in order to move forward. Otherwise, you're going to come into the next coaching session and you go, so how did it go last week? And you go, I haven't got anywhere. So that whole process was a waste of time. And that's really important.
And I think that's one of those things that differentiates a good coach or an average coach from a great coach. You know, you're personally committed and invested in the process.
Absolutely.
Somebody else's journey, but you're part of it, and you're their cheerleader and you're their partner in the journeys. That's great. Wonderful. Thank you so much for your time, Oliver. I'm going to ask you to share some parting thoughts on maybe the top 3 benefits of coaching before we sign off in this episode. So tell me top 3 benefits, why everybody should get a coach, why businesses should get coaches.
And so for people as an individual, it's really realizing and clarifying your goals is the first thing, because we go through life, it's all just hectic, but we never actually focus on what we want to achieve. So the first thing, understanding your goals. The next thing would be to focus purely on yourself. It's very rare that we get an opportunity, especially in a corporate setting, to purely focus on what we want to achieve, not what the business goals are. They kind of come secondary, but when you improve yourself, that's there for the business. And the last thing is just having open, honest feedback, which allows you to raise your self-awareness and essentially understand yourself better, which allows you to understand others better, and that then you can focus on being the best version of yourself to maximize your potential.
Wonderful, wonderful. And
For businesses, I think the three main things would be an engaged workforce, which obviously has its benefits in terms of productivity and less increased retention rates, etc. Customer satisfaction with a more engaged workforce. The second one is really about raising employees' self-awareness, because if you're increasing employee self-awareness, that allows the communication to be smoother and more productivity, and also less conflict within the business, so that there's multiple benefits that come off the back of that. And then lastly is the most important one, and that's the financial, the bottom line. Yeah. If you've got a more engaged workforce, you've got less hiring costs, you've got less churn, you've got more satisfied customers, and at the end of the day, that's going to increase your top line, and it's going to decrease your costs and increase your bottom line. Yeah. So it's a no-brainer for me.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, thank you so much. That was very insightful.
No problem.
And we thank you for your time today, Oliver. Thank you for joining us. On that note, we are signing off. We'll be back with another expert, another conversation, another episode. Thank you.